So let's talk about one mistake that I personally made with body language, reading the body language of a whitetail buck. So I'm going to tell you a story about an incident that occurred to me years ago, and it was an isolated incident. I typically don't talk about isolated incidences because there's no statistics to apply them to, but this one particular story made me very, very cognizant on reading the room after I paint a picture, especially when I'm calling, and reading the body language of a whitetail buck. So, excuse me. There was a buck, mainframe 8, good quality deer that I had full intentions of taking, probably score somewhere in the 120s. I'd be super happy with a deer of that caliber in my area. So archery season, latter part of October, getting into November, I have this buck pattern, and I'm still working a full-time job for a municipality at that point. So time was of the essence. Hit the time clock, boogie back to my property, perfect wind direction. I walk down from my shop and boogie right up into my stand. So scent control at the time, really not a big deal for me. I really didn't have temperature change. I didn't have to worry about the thermals, and I had a good predominant wind. So I get into stand as quick as possible, and I play bloody knuckles right off the rip after I clip in and hang up the rattling antlers. I grunt a couple times. I have pretty high anticipation of this deer coming from straight ahead off to my right, which would be like my northeast. So this buck immediately, like, it was just the coincidence and timing of just like perfect scenario, like this is going to be perfect, super quick. He comes in, he breaks the sanctuary of cover. When he breaks cover, does what most deer do that I have watched. So if you have a different perspective, let me know. Breaks cover, stops, and he checks his surroundings. He's looking for what made that sound. He's looking for another deer. Next thing he does is what I call, he makes a physical sign of acknowledgement. He heard me, he's coming. So I'm confident, don't do anything else. Now this is like within 80 yards. I don't feel another reason to give another follow-up call unless I have to manipulate the deer. I want to see what he's going to do. He makes a scrape, checks his surroundings. He makes a rub, checks his surroundings, displaying dominance. I'm very confident this deer is going to come. So when he's done, he approaches right on that one travel corridor. I have high anticipation. Oh, this is going to happen. And he stops at about 34 yards, slight quartering towards. Now, I like to pride myself and think I'm pretty darn patient. So at 34 yards away, why shoot him there on a quartering towards when he can continue on that travel path? And I have textbook, slight quartering away, broadside at 28 yards. So I leave him alone. And he stands in that spot at about that 34 yard mark. And the next thing I see is him just looking to my left, because that's where I was projecting sound, off to my left. I want that deer to move from right to left to give me a broadside shot. I want him to look into that thicket off to my left where he thinks the sound came from. So that was the last calling that I was projecting sound into. He's looking there. I did this. I painted this picture. And I see his head go down, and he tucks tail, flicks tail, tucks tail, and then turns around and walks away. So I'm super confused. My thermals weren't an issue. He didn't smell me. He didn't see me. Focus of attention was off to my left. I know what happened. I know what happened. To this day, I know what happened, and I wasn't reading the body language. So he leaves. I'm confused. So I grunt at him a couple of times. I don't grunt at him. I grunt to my left into that thicket. He turns around. He heard me, and he does it. Here comes around too. He gets to almost that same spot, hits the brakes, cowers, tucks his head, tucks tail, flicks tail, tucks tail, and he leaves, and he goes up to my hard right. I'm like beside myself, like what is happening with this deer? Like, this story is like total isolated incident, but it's the body language where I screwed up. He gets to the top of the hill, and I have nothing to lose at this point. I pick up the antlers again, and I just click, click, click. I'm just tickling the tines together, and then I start raking the tree that I'm standing in, that I have my hang on. And I hear that buck at the top of the hill grunting so loud. I can see the treetops shaking. There's still some good foliage on the trees. I can't see him, but he is fired up, turns around, comes back down, backtracks himself, totally bristled, hard stepping. I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen this time. And he gets to almost that same spot and cowers and puts his head down as he's looking to the left where he heard my last sound coming from for the third time. Amazing to watch. He tucks tail, turns around, and just walks off in the direction that he originally came from. I hung up my bow and I sat down, collected my thoughts, and I'm trying to figure out what just happened here. As I'm sitting, I hear, "Bit." And that's when stupid game call builder Brian recognizes 2 bucks. The one I was going to shoot and the buck to my left that was in that thicket that I was communicating into. So thick, wind direction was perfect, but line of sight, we cannot see each other. There was another buck present, making sound, making noise on the ground, keeping eyes and focus of attention. So I was kind of, playing matchmaker between the two. Called them both in, but I have eyes on one. I didn't read the body language. So when you see that head go down, this is not the isolated incident. The story is the isolated incident. The body language is not the isolated incident. When you yell at your dog and your dog cowers, it's a sign of submission. Watching whitetail bucks do this, you will physically see a sign of submission when that head goes down and it cowers. Tuck tail, flick tail. If you see a buck just put its head down, it is a physical sign of submission. I know that. I've watched that. I've seen this, but I painted this picture. That's why I was so complacent and confused as to the scenario that I'm watching. So what happens next is when I hear that little bit of a just soft, deep grunt off to my left, it was a deer that I had 4 years of history with. He's 6.5 years old. I have a high pressured hunting area where I live. Rod and gun club up at the top of the hill for me, a hunting preserve 1 road over from me that's about, I think, 400 to 500 acres. There's a good amount of pressure in the woods, and this buck lived to 6.5 years old. Not a big scoring deer. He looked like a mule deer. Wicked big forks, really wide, great mass, not a big scoring deer. He was just a wicked, huge 2x2, just this massive forkhorn. And he lived in a high pressure area to be 6.5 years old, which is super amazing and super impressive, especially where I live. But the whole point of this story was my complacency on not reading the room. And after I painted that picture, I didn't read the body language. I knew it was that buck, even though it was so thick in there. When he turned his head, I could see the profile and the rack, and there was no mistaking it was that deer. Everything that happened in front of me kept him there. The presence of that other deer, the ground noise that other deer was making kept that deer there, but both of them at their angle, they had line of sight with each other. That's why the deer that I was going to shoot was giving that sign of submission. So that's just something I wanted to portray to you in one story of read the room, read the body language, whether you're blind calling or you have physical contact of actually visually looking at a target deer, or you're just sitting on watch. Look for those signs of body language, and if you see that head cower, there's probably another chef in the kitchen. Look to the upwind. That deer either smells something or sees something, and if there's a physical sign of acknowledgement of submission, there's probably a good age class deer to that deer's upwind that you have eyes on. So keep your head on a swivel and just remember these things, that if it's not a race, slow down and read the body language, read the room.